The blood on the telegram crumpled in her hand, made Eleanor Kingston's heart hammer against her ribs as she stood in the dusty street of Desdemona, Texas, watching her betrothed Charles Whitmore step out of the bank with that familiar, calculating smile. It was August 1882, and the scorching heat rising from the packed earth felt nothing compared to the cold realization spreading through her chest. She had just received an anonymous message, delivered by a boy who vanished before she could ask questions, claiming Charles planned to access her inheritance the moment they married. Eleanor had dismissed it as cruel gossip until she saw him emerging from the very bank where her father's fortune sat waiting, the smile on his face too satisfied, too victorious for a simple withdrawal. She tucked the telegram into her skirt pocket and forced herself to breathe, to think clearly despite the panic threatening to overwhelm her senses. Charles had courted her for 6 months, always the perfect gentleman from Philadelphia, always speaking of their future with words that seemed sincere until this very moment. Now, every compliment felt like a lie, every promise a trap she had walked into willingly. Her father had died 3 months ago, leaving her the sole heir to his cattle operation and substantial savings. At 23, Eleanor had been grateful for Charles's attention, for someone who seemed to see past her inheritance to the woman beneath. What a fool she had been. Eleanor, darling. Charles approached with his polished boots clicking against the wooden planks of the boardwalk, his suit immaculate despite the dust that covered everything in this oil boomtown. I was just handling some business matters, nothing for you to concern yourself with. She wanted to confront him immediately, to demand answers, but something held her tongue. Perhaps it was the way his eyes flickered with something she had never noticed before, a coldness that made her skin crawl. "Of course," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was just collecting fabric from the general store." "Excellent. The wedding is only 2 weeks away. You must look perfect." He took her arm, his grip just a fraction too tight, possessive rather than protective. "I have another appointment. I will see you at dinner." Eleanor watched him walk toward the saloon, her mind racing through every conversation they had shared, every moment she had attributed to romance that might have been manipulation instead. She needed help, needed someone who could investigate without arousing Charles's suspicion. Her gaze drifted across the street where a tall cowboy was tying his horse to the hitching post outside the feed store. She had seen him around town occasionally, always keeping to himself, a man who seemed to notice everything while saying little. Something about his weathered face and steady hands suggested he was someone who could be trusted, someone who understood this harsh land in ways Charles never would. Eleanor made a decision born of desperation and crossed the street before she could second-guess herself. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I need to hire someone for a job that requires discretion." The cowboy turned, and Eleanor found herself looking into eyes the color of aged whiskey, sharp and assessing beneath the brim of his hat. He was perhaps 28, with sun-darkened skin and the lean build of a man who spent his life in the saddle. "Adam Reeves, miss. What kind of job?" "The kind that involves finding out if someone is lying about who they really are." Eleanor glanced over her shoulder to ensure Charles had disappeared into the saloon. "I am Eleanor Kingston, and I believe my betrothed is planning to steal my inheritance. I need proof before I make accusations that could ruin my reputation if I am wrong." Adam studied her for a long moment, and Eleanor forced herself not to look away from that penetrating gaze. Finally, he nodded. "All right, Miss Kingston. Tell me everything you know, and I will see what I can uncover. But you should know that if he is the kind of man you suspect, confronting him could be dangerous." Relief flooded through her so suddenly that her knees almost buckled. "Thank you. Can we speak somewhere private?" He gestured toward a small restaurant at the end of the street, a place where oil workers and ranch hands gathered for meals, far from the establishments Charles frequented. Eleanor followed him, aware that even this simple act could spark gossip, but her future was at stake. She had to know the truth before she signed marriage documents that would give Charles legal access to everything her father had worked his entire life to build. Inside the restaurant, they took a corner table away from the other patrons. Adam ordered coffee for them both and waited patiently while Eleanor organized her thoughts. The telegram felt like it was burning a hole through her pocket, physical evidence of accusations she desperately hoped were false. "I received this today." She pushed the crumpled paper across the scarred wooden table. "Anonymous, which makes me suspicious of its validity. But then I saw Charles leaving the bank with an expression I have never seen before. He looked pleased with himself in a way that made my stomach turn." Adam read the telegram carefully, his expression revealing nothing. "Your father passed recently, 3 months ago. Heart gave out while he was checking fence lines on our ranch." The grief still felt fresh, a wound that had not begun to heal. "Charles appeared in town shortly after the funeral. He seemed kind when I needed kindness most. Convenient timing." Adam's voice was neutral, but Eleanor heard the skepticism beneath. "What do you know about his background?" "He claims to be from a shipping family in Philadelphia, that he came west seeking opportunities in the oil boom. He has money, or at least appears to, always dressed well and staying at the nicest hotel in town." Eleanor wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, needing something to anchor her. "He was charming, attentive, and said all the right things about wanting to help me manage the ranch and my father's business interests. I thought he understood how important it was to preserve my father's legacy." Adam leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant as he processed the information. "I will start by checking with the bank, see what business he has been conducting there. Then I will send some telegrams to Philadelphia, verify his story about his family. It might take a few days to get responses. The wedding is in 2 weeks." Eleanor heard the tremor in her voice and hated it. She had always prided herself on being strong, capable, the kind of woman who could run a ranch alongside her father. Charles had made her feel weak, dependent, and she resented him for it. "If he is planning something, it will happen soon after we marry. Then we work fast." Adam's eyes met hers again, and this time Eleanor saw something that looked like understanding. "I have seen men like him before, if he is what you fear. They see the frontier as a place where they can reinvent themselves, where no one checks too closely at a man's past. Women alone with property become targets." The bluntness of his words stung, but Eleanor appreciated the honesty. "What should I do in the meantime?" "Act as though nothing is wrong." "Exactly that. Do not give him any reason to suspect you know something. Keep to your routine, smile when expected, and do not let him know you are investigating." Adam pulled out a small notebook and pencil from his vest pocket. "Tell me about his habits, where he goes, who he associates with." Eleanor spent the next hour detailing everything she knew about Charles's activities in Desdemona. He spent considerable time at the saloon, though she had never seen him obviously drunk. He claimed to be meeting with other businessmen about oil investments, but she realized now that she had only his word for that. He stayed at the Grand Hotel and always seemed to have ready cash, though she had never seen evidence of actual work or business transactions beyond his vague descriptions. "He has been pressing me to sign papers giving him power of attorney over my affairs once we are married," Eleanor added, the memory making her feel ill. "He said it was standard, that it would make managing everything easier. I told him I wanted to wait until after the wedding, that it felt premature." Adam's jaw tightened. "Good instinct, Do not sign anything, no matter what he says. That kind of document would give him complete control over your assets. They parted ways with a plan for Adam to report his findings in 3 days. Eleanor returned to her small house on the edge of town, the place she had lived with her father before his death, and tried to maintain the appearance of a nervous bride preparing for her wedding. But every interaction with Charles over the next few days felt like a performance, and she found herself watching him with new eyes, seeing things she had missed before. The way he calculated everything, always positioning himself to appear generous while actually spending little of his own money. The smooth lies he told about his day, stories that sounded plausible but lacked specific details. The carefully constructed persona of a successful Eastern gentleman that now seemed like exactly that, a construction with no foundation beneath. 3 days later, Adam found her at the general store and quietly suggested they take a ride out to her ranch to discuss livestock matters, a reasonable excuse that would not raise suspicion. Eleanor saddled her mare and they rode in silence until the town disappeared behind a rise in the dusty terrain. The August sun beat down mercilessly, and heat shimmered off the scrub brush that dotted the landscape between clusters of mesquite trees. I checked with the bank manager, discreetly. Adam kept his horse at an easy walk beside hers. Charles has been asking detailed questions about your accounts, the procedure for transferring funds, and the requirements for a husband to access his wife's assets. The manager found it odd enough to mention when I asked about recent unusual activity. Eleanor's hands tightened on the reins, so the telegram was accurate. There is more. I sent inquiries to Philadelphia through a friend who works for the railroad. The Whitmore shipping family exists, but they have no son named Charles. I also checked with hotels in Fort Worth and Dallas. A man matching his description was run out of Fort Worth 6 months ago for courting a widow and attempting to forge documents giving him access to her late husband's estate. The words hit Eleanor like physical blows, each revelation stripping away another layer of the illusion she had believed. So everything was a lie. His name, his background, his intentions, all of it. I am sorry. Adam's voice was gentle, and when Eleanor glanced at him, she saw genuine sympathy in his expression. I know this is not what you hoped to hear. I needed to hear the truth. Eleanor stopped her horse and took a deep breath, letting the hot Texas wind dry the angry tears that threatened to fall. I was a fool. I was lonely and grieving, and he exploited that. Now I need to figure out how to extract myself from this engagement without him realizing I know what he is. That is the dangerous part. Adam dismounted and helped Eleanor down from her saddle, his hands steady and respectful. Men like him, when cornered, can become unpredictable. You need protection, but it has to look natural, not like you are surrounding yourself with guards. They stood in the shade of a gnarled mesquite tree, and Eleanor found herself truly looking at Adam for the first time beyond his utility as an investigator. He had kind eyes despite the hardness the frontier had carved into him. He spoke to her as an equal, not as a simple female who needed a man to manage her affairs, and he had helped her without asking for anything in return, motivated by what seemed to be simple decency. Why did you help me? The question came out before she could stop it. You do not know me, and this is not your problem. Adam was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting across the landscape of dry grass and stubborn scrub. I grew up in Kansas, on a farm my mother inherited from her father. When my father died, a man showed up claiming to be a business partner owed money. Turned out to be a con man. My mother nearly lost everything before a neighbor helped prove the documents were forged. I was 15, old enough to understand how close we came to losing our home. He looked back at Eleanor. I guess I cannot stand by when I see history trying to repeat itself. Something in his honesty made Eleanor's chest ache with emotions she did not have names for yet. I need to break the engagement, but if I simply call it off, Charles will know I suspect him. He might become desperate, might try something drastic before he leaves town. We need to give him a different reason, one that bruises his pride enough that he wants to leave quickly. Adam leaned against the tree, thinking, "What if you had already married someone else?" Eleanor stared at him. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that if you were already married, legally bound to another man, Charles would have no claim to anything. He would be angry, certainly, but he would have no legal recourse. He would have to move on to his next target. But I am not married to anyone else." Eleanor's heart was racing, though whether from fear or something else entirely, she could not say. "You could be, if you were willing." Adam met her eyes steadily. "Marry me, Miss Kingston. A marriage of convenience to protect your assets and your future. I will not make demands on you or your property. Once Charles is gone and enough time has passed that we are certain he will not return, we can quietly dissolve the marriage if that is what you want. But in the meantime, you will be protected." The proposal was insane, utterly impractical, and yet Eleanor found herself actually considering it. She knew nothing about this man beyond what he had shown her over the past few days, and yet he had been more honest with her than Charles had been in 6 months. There was something solid about Adam Reeves, something that suggested he was exactly who he appeared to be, no performance, no hidden agenda. That is quite an offer to make to a woman you barely know. Eleanor kept her voice level despite the chaos of her thoughts. "What do you gain from this arrangement?" "The satisfaction of knowing I helped prevent a crime." Adam shrugged. "And maybe a friend if you are willing. This frontier can be lonely, and I respect a woman who asks hard questions instead of just accepting what she is told." Eleanor walked a few paces away, her mind spinning through alternatives and finding none that offered the same level of protection and simplicity. A broken engagement would make Charles suspicious. Involving the law would require proof she did not have and might take too long. But a secret marriage, followed by a public revelation, would cut through all the complications in one decisive action. If we do this, we do it properly. She turned back to Adam, her decision crystallizing even as she spoke. "I will not trick you into a sham marriage only to take advantage of your protection without offering something in return. You will have a job managing my ranch if you want it, and fair pay for that work. If the marriage becomes more than a business arrangement, it will be because we both choose it freely. And if we decide to end it, we part as friends." Adam extended his hand, and Eleanor shook it, feeling calluses that spoke of years of hard work. "Then we have an agreement, Miss Kingston." "When should we make this official?" "Today, if possible. The longer we wait, the more chances Charles has to move forward with his plans." Eleanor felt a strange combination of terror and relief. "There is a justice of the peace in the next town over, about an hour's ride. He does not know Charles, so there is less risk of word getting back before we are ready." They rode to the neighboring town of Ranger in the blazing afternoon heat, hardly speaking but somehow comfortable in the silence. Eleanor kept waiting for second thoughts to plague her, for the rational voice in her head to scream that this was madness. Instead, she felt a growing certainty that this was right, that Adam Reeves was someone she could trust in ways she had never been able to trust Charles Whitmore. The justice of the peace was a gray-haired man who asked no questions beyond the legal requirements. Eleanor found herself speaking vows in a small, spare room that smelled of leather and dust, her hand in Adam's as they promised to honor and cherish each other. The words felt surreal, yet Adam said them with a sincerity that made her throat tight. When the justice pronounced them married, Adam leaned in and pressed a chaste kiss to her cheek, a gesture of respect that somehow meant more than passionate declarations would have. "Well, Mrs. Reeves," Adam said softly as they stepped back into the brutal sunshine, "how do you want to handle telling your former betrothed?" Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the simple gold band Adam had produced from his pocket, worn smooth as though it had belonged to someone else once. "We return to Desdemona separately. Maintain appearances for today. Tomorrow, I will inform Charles that I married you last night in a moment of impulse and passion. Let him think I am a flighty woman who acted on emotion. He will be furious, but he will also know he has no legal claim anymore. And if he does not accept that quietly?" Adam asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Then you stay close, and we handle whatever comes." Eleanor met his eyes, seeing her own determination reflected there. "I am done being a victim of other people's schemes. This is my land, my life, and I will fight to keep it." They parted ways outside Ranger, Adam heading to collect his few possessions from the boarding house where he had been staying, Eleanor returning to town to play the role of oblivious bride one final time. She endured dinner with Charles that evening, listening to him discuss wedding plans with a proprietary air that now made her skin crawl. He talked about the honeymoon he had planned, a trip to San Antonio that would conveniently keep them away from Desdemona for several weeks, plenty of time to transfer funds and consolidate his control over her assets. "You seem distracted, darling." Charles reached across the table to take her hand, his touch making her want to recoil. "Wedding nerves, something like that." Eleanor forced a smile. "It is a big step, changing one's entire life. You will not regret it," Charles assured her with complete confidence. "I will take care of everything. You will never have to worry about business matters or difficult decisions again." The condescension in his voice was clear now that she was listening for it, the assumption that she was incapable of managing her own affairs. How had she ever found that attitude comforting instead of insulting? Grief had made her vulnerable, and Charles had exploited that vulnerability with practiced ease. The realization made her angry, a clean fury that burned away the last traces of doubt about her hasty marriage to Adam. That night, alone in her house, Eleanor twisted the gold ring on her finger and thought about the cowboy she had married on instinct and desperation. She knew so little about him, yet he had shown her more genuine care in a handful of days than Charles had managed in months. There was something appealing about Adam's quiet competence, the way he listened without trying to solve all her problems for her, the respect in his eyes when he looked at her. Morning came with its usual brutal heat, and Eleanor dressed carefully in a simple day dress, preparing for the confrontation ahead. She found Charles at the hotel restaurant, enjoying breakfast with the air of a man whose plans were proceeding perfectly. His smile when he saw her was warm and false, and Eleanor marveled that she had ever found it charming. "Charles, we need to talk privately." She kept her voice low but firm, and something in her tone made his expression shift to concern. "Of course, darling. Is something wrong?" He led her to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, away from curious ears. Eleanor did not sit down, needing the advantage of standing for this conversation. "I cannot marry you. I made a terrible mistake in accepting your proposal, and I am ending our engagement effective immediately." Charles stared at her, shock and confusion warring on his face. "What are you talking about? The wedding is in less than 2 weeks. Everything is arranged. I do not care." Eleanor kept her voice steady, channeling all the anger and betrayal into cold resolve. "I married someone else yesterday. I am sorry for any inconvenience this causes you, but my decision is final." The shock on Charles's face transformed into fury so quickly that Eleanor took an instinctive step back. "You did what? Who? This is absurd, Eleanor. You are clearly having some kind of breakdown from the stress of planning a wedding. We can work through this." "I am not having a breakdown. I married Adam Reeves, a rancher who has been helping me with property matters." The lie came easily, mixing just enough truth to be believable. "I realized I have feelings for him that I never had for you, and I acted on them. I am sorry, Charles, but this is for the best." "For the best?" Charles's voice rose, drawing attention from the hotel staff. "You threw away everything we planned for some cowboy you barely know. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I know exactly what I have done." Eleanor met his furious gaze without flinching. "I made a choice about my own life and my own future. I wish you well, Charles, but we are finished." She turned to leave, but Charles grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "You are not walking away from me. We had an agreement, a contract. I have invested months in this relationship. Let go of me." Eleanor's voice was ice, and she saw Adam appear in the doorway of the hotel, his presence a silent threat. "You have no claim on me, legal or otherwise. Our engagement is over." Charles followed her gaze and saw Adam, his expression twisting into something ugly. "So that is your new husband, a common ranch hand. You are making a massive mistake, Eleanor. He cannot give you what I can." "He does not love you, miss." Adam's voice cut across the lobby, calm and certain. "A man who loves a woman does not grab her in anger. A man who loves a woman respects her choices, even when they hurt. He sees you as property, not a partner." The words hung in the air, and Eleanor saw Charles flinch as though struck. For a moment she thought he might become violent, his hand tightening on her arm. Then Adam took a step forward, not threatening but absolutely solid, and Charles released her with a curse. "You are both fools. You deserve each other." Charles straightened his jacket with jerky movements. "I will be leaving Desdemona today. Do not expect me to be here to pick up the pieces when you realize your mistake." He stormed out of the hotel, and Eleanor felt her knees go weak with relief. Adam was at her side immediately, his hand under her elbow steadying her. "Are you all right?" "I am now." Eleanor looked up at him, this man who was legally her husband, and felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "Thank you for being here. I did not expect him to grab me like that. Men like him show their true nature when they do not get what they want." Adam guided her to a chair, his touch gentle despite the strength in his hands. "You are safe now. He has no reason to stay in town, and everyone just witnessed him losing his temper. If he tries anything, there are plenty of people who saw him assault you." The hotel manager appeared with water and concerned questions, and Eleanor found herself explaining her secret marriage to a growing audience of curious onlookers. By noon, the entire town knew that Eleanor Kingston had married Adam Reeves in a whirlwind romance, and Charles Whitmore had left on the afternoon stage in a fury. The gossip would burn through Desdemona like wildfire, but Eleanor found she did not care. She was free, truly free, for the first time since her father's death. Adam moved his few belongings into the small house that evening, taking the spare room without any assumption of sharing her bed. They ate dinner together in slightly awkward silence, two strangers bound by legal documents and a shared conspiracy, trying to figure out how to navigate this new reality. "I meant what I said about you managing the ranch," Eleanor said finally, pushing food around her plate. "My father's foreman is competent, but he is getting old and has been talking about retirement. If you are willing to learn the operation, the job is yours with fair wages." "I appreciate that, and I accept." Adam met her eyes across the table. "I want to be clear about something, though. I did not marry you to get access to your property or to take over your life. This is your ranch, your inheritance, your decisions. I am here to help, not to control. The contrast to Charles's attitude was so stark that Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I believe you. I do not know why, given that we barely know each other, but I trust you more than I ever trusted him. Maybe because I have not given you reason not to trust me." Adam smiled slightly, and Eleanor realized it was the first time she had seen a real smile from him, not guarded or careful but genuine. "I know this is not how anyone imagines their marriage starting, but we can make the best of it. Get to know each other properly, see where this goes." Over the following weeks, Eleanor discovered that being married to Adam Reeves was surprisingly easy. He rose before dawn to work with the ranch hands, learning the rhythms of the cattle operation with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. He consulted with Eleanor on major decisions, but handled day-to-day problems without needing constant direction. He was respectful of her space, never presuming intimacy, but he was also companionable, someone she found herself wanting to talk to at the end of each day. They fell into a routine of sharing meals and discussing the ranch business, conversations that gradually expanded to include their pasts, their hopes, their opinions on everything from politics to literature. Eleanor learned that Adam had been drifting for years after his mother died, working ranches across Kansas and Texas, never staying anywhere long because nowhere felt like home. He had a dry sense of humor and a passion for horse breeding, dreams of building a reputation for quality stock that he had never had the capital or stability to pursue. "You could do that here," Eleanor said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the scrubland. "We have good grazing land and water access. If you wanted to start breeding horses alongside the cattle operation, there is room for it." Adam looked at her with surprise and something that might have been hope. "You would be willing to invest in that kind of venture?" "It is a sound business idea, and you clearly have the knowledge to make it work." Eleanor realized she was not just saying it to be kind. She genuinely believed in his capability. Besides, it would diversify our income, make the ranch more resilient. "My father always said never to put all your resources in one basket. Your father sounds like he was a wise man." Adam's voice was soft. "I wish I could have met him. He would have liked you." Eleanor was certain of that. Her father had valued hard work and integrity above all else, qualities Adam embodied completely. "He would have approved of this marriage far more than the one I nearly made." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to purple, and Eleanor found herself noticing things about Adam she had been too distracted to see before. The way his hands, scarred and calloused from years of labor, could be surprisingly gentle when handling a frightened horse. The intelligence in his eyes, self-educated through years of reading whatever books he could get his hands on. The integrity that ran through him like bedrock, unshakable and true. She was starting to realize that what had begun as a marriage of convenience was transforming into something deeper, something real. The question was whether Adam felt the same way, or if he still saw this as a temporary arrangement that would eventually end. 2 months after their hasty wedding, Eleanor received a telegram from the law office in Fort Worth. Charles Whitmore had been arrested trying to run the same scheme on another woman, and the authorities wanted Eleanor to testify about his attempt to defraud her. Adam accompanied her to Fort Worth for the trial, a 2-day journey that meant staying overnight in a hotel. "We should probably share a room," Adam said quietly as they stood in the hotel lobby. "We are supposed to be a real married couple, and people talk." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks but nodded. "You are right. We need to maintain appearances." The hotel room was small but clean, with a single bed that suddenly seemed enormous. They prepared for sleep with awkward politeness, Eleanor changing in the washroom while Adam made a pallet on the floor with spare blankets. "You do not have to sleep on the floor," Eleanor said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "We are both adults, and the bed is large enough for two people to share without impropriety." Adam looked at her for a long moment, and Eleanor saw uncertainty in his eyes for the first time since she had known him. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something. This marriage, it started as a convenience, a way to protect you from a con man. But somewhere along the way, it became something different for me. I find myself caring about you in ways I did not expect, and I do not want to make you uncomfortable." Eleanor's heart was racing, the careful distance they had maintained dissolving in the intimate space of the hotel room. "It became different for me too. I find myself thinking about you constantly, noticing things that have nothing to do with business or convenience. I look forward to our conversations, to the way you look at me like I have a brain in my head instead of just being decorative. You are anything but decorative." Adam took a step closer, his voice rough with emotion. "You are one of the strongest, smartest people I have ever met. You run a ranch, make hard decisions, and you did not fall apart when you discovered the man you thought you loved was planning to rob you. You are extraordinary, Eleanor." No one had ever called her extraordinary before. Beautiful, yes, when her appearance was being appraised. Wealthy, certainly, when her inheritance was being discussed. But extraordinary for who she was as a person, for her strength and intelligence and capability that was new and precious and overwhelming. "I think I am falling in love with you," Eleanor whispered, the confession terrifying and liberating in equal measure. "That was not supposed to happen, but I cannot help it." Adam closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "I fell in love with you the day you marched up to me in the street and asked for help. You were terrified but determined, and I knew you were someone special. Everything since then has only made me more certain." He kissed her then, a kiss nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding, a kiss that tasted of promise and passion, and all the feelings they had been carefully not acknowledging for weeks. Eleanor melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I want this to be a real marriage," he said quietly. "Not temporary, not for convenience, but because I want to spend my life with you, if you will have me." "Yes." The word came out fierce and certain. "Yes to all of it, to everything." They shared the bed that night, and Eleanor discovered that making love with someone who truly cared about her, who saw her as an equal and a partner, was nothing like the clinical explanations she had received from well-meaning older women. Adam was patient and passionate, attentive to her needs in ways that made her feel cherished rather than used. By morning, Eleanor felt like their marriage had been consecrated properly, sealed with intimacy born of genuine feeling rather than obligation. The trial was brief, with Eleanor's testimony and evidence from other victims ensuring Charles Whitmore would spend years in prison for fraud and attempted theft. Seeing him in chains, all his polish and charm stripped away to reveal the petty criminal beneath, Eleanor felt nothing but relief that she had escaped his trap. As they left the courthouse, Adam took her hand, their fingers twining together naturally. "Do you think about what your life would have been like if you had married him?" Adam asked as they walked toward the hotel to collect their belongings. "Only as a warning to pay attention to instinct," Eleanor replied. "I felt something was wrong long before I got that telegram, but I dismissed it because I thought I should be grateful anyone wanted to marry me. That was foolish. I deserved better than settling for someone who saw me as a mark. You deserve everything good this world has to offer." Adam lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with old-fashioned gallantry that made her smile. "I intend to spend the rest of my life trying to give you that." They returned to Desdemona as a couple genuinely in love. And if the townspeople noticed that the newlyweds seemed more affectionate than during their first weeks of marriage, no one commented beyond pleased smiles and knowing nods. The ranch prospered under their joint management, with Eleanor's business acumen and Adam's practical expertise proving to be an ideal combination. They built a small breeding operation for horses as well, and within a year, Adam's eye for quality stock began attracting buyers from across Texas. Life was not without challenges, of course. There were droughts that tested their water resources, cattle rustlers that required vigilance, and the usual difficulties of running a large operation in an unforgiving landscape. But Eleanor and Adam faced each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. 2 years after their impromptu wedding, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure, memories of her own mother's difficult childbirth and early death making her anxious. Adam was unfailingly supportive, arranging for the best doctor in the region and treating Eleanor like precious cargo, much to her amused exasperation. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested when he tried to insist she stop riding horses in her 4th month. "I know, but you are carrying the most important person in my world besides yourself," Adam replied, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "Indulge me in being overprotective." Their son was born in the spring of 1885, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him James, after Eleanor's father, and Adam cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed with emotions he had never expected to feel. Eleanor watched her husband cradle their infant with infinite tenderness and knew that her impulsive decision to marry a stranger had been the best choice of her life. "He is perfect," Adam whispered, his voice thick with wonder. "You are amazing, Eleanor. I cannot believe we made something this beautiful. We make a good team." Eleanor was exhausted from the long labor but radiantly happy, her family complete in ways she had not known she needed, in ranching and in this. As James grew, they discovered he had inherited his mother's stubborn determination and his father's quiet competence, a combination that made him fearless in ways that terrified and delighted his parents. By the time he was 3, he was toddling around the ranch getting into everything, fascinated by the horses and cattle, already showing signs of becoming a natural horseman like his father. Eleanor and Adam talked about having more children, and 2 years after James, their daughter Catherine was born, named after Adam's mother. She was a serene baby where James had been fussy, content to observe the world with solemn eyes that saw everything. The ranch house rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing, a warmth that made the harsh Texas landscape feel like paradise. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Adam surprised Eleanor with a picnic at the same spot where they had stood 5 years earlier, when she was engaged to a con man and he was a drifting cowboy. So much had changed since that desperate day, but the scrubby mesquite tree remained, a silent witness to the transformation of 2 strangers into partners, lovers, and parents. "I have been thinking about that day," Adam said as they sat on a blanket watching their children chase lizards through the sparse grass. "About how close we both came to very different lives. If you had not trusted me, if I had not agreed to help you, if any number of things had gone differently." But they did not go differently. Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sage that always clung to him. "We found each other exactly when we needed to, and we built something good from desperation and quick decisions. Best quick decision I ever made." Adam kissed the top of her head, his arms wrapping around her in an embrace that felt like home. "Marrying you, Eleanor, even under those strange circumstances, that was the moment my life truly began." Eleanor thought about Charles Whitmore occasionally, wondering where he was after his release from prison, whether he had learned anything from his arrest or simply moved on to new victims. But mostly, she did not think about him at all, too busy living the rich, full life she had built with Adam. The ranch prospered, expanding as they bought adjacent land from neighbors looking to sell. Adam's horse breeding operation gained a reputation across Texas and beyond, with buyers traveling from as far as California to purchase his stock. They became pillars of the Desdemona community, respected not just for their success, but for their integrity and generosity. When the oil boom began to fade and some families faced hardship, Eleanor and Adam helped where they could, offering jobs or loans or simply support. They had been given a second chance through their unlikely union, and they believed in passing that grace forward to others who needed it. By the time James was 10 and Catherine was 8, with a new baby son named Samuel completing their family, Eleanor sometimes had to remind herself that her marriage had started as a desperate scheme to escape a con man. The love between her and Adam was so deep, so fundamental to who she had become, that it seemed impossible it had not always existed. They moved through their days in the comfortable rhythm of long partnership, able to communicate with glances and small gestures, their lives so intertwined that separation would have been like losing a limb. "You ever regret it?" Eleanor asked Adam one night as they sat on their porch, a tradition they had maintained through all the years and changes. "Tying yourself to a woman you barely knew to help her escape a bad situation." Adam looked at her as though she had lost her mind. "Eleanor Reeves, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. I regret nothing about our marriage, not the strange beginning, not the hasty vows, not a single moment of the life we have built together. You and our children are everything I never knew I wanted and could not imagine living without." "I feel the same way." Eleanor took his hand, their fingers fitting together as perfectly as they had that first day, though now the gesture was familiar rather than foreign. "You saved me, Adam, not just from Charles but from a life where I would have settled for less than I deserved. You showed me what real love looks like, what real partnership means. I fell in love with you so fast it terrified me, but it was the best thing I could have done." They sat together in the gathering dusk, listening to the sounds of their children playing inside the house, the distant lowing of cattle, the endless whisper of wind across the Texas prairie. The land was harsh and unforgiving, but they had made it bloom through hard work and determination. They had taken a marriage born of deception and desperation, and transformed it into something beautiful and enduring. Years continued to roll past with the steady inevitability of seasons, bringing changes both challenging and joyful. James grew into a capable young man who shared his father's passion for horses, taking over more of the breeding operation as Adam's hair turned gray, and his joints complained about long days in the saddle. Catherine proved to have her mother's head for business, managing the ranch accounts with meticulous attention that ensured their continued prosperity. Samuel, the baby, turned out to be the dreamer of the family, more interested in books and ideas than ranching, and Eleanor and Adam supported his desire to attend university with the same enthusiasm they showed for their other children's pursuits. Eleanor sometimes took out the crumpled telegram that had started everything, the anonymous warning that had saved her from disaster. She never discovered who had sent it, though she suspected It might have been a clerk at the bank who overheard Charles asking suspicious questions. Whoever it was, she owed them an unpayable debt. That small act of courage from a stranger had set in motion events that gave her Adam, her children, the life she treasured. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality cattle and exceptional horses. But Eleanor and Adam's real legacy was not measured in acres or assets. It was measured in the love they shared, the family they built, the second chances they gave each other and passed on to others. They proved that sometimes the most desperate decisions could lead to the most beautiful outcomes, that love could grow from the strangest soil and bloom into something extraordinary. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a celebration that brought together friends and neighbors from across the county. There were speeches about the respect everyone held for the couple, stories about their generosity and integrity, toasts to their continued health and happiness. Through it all, Eleanor and Adam sat together, hands clasped, exchanging the private glances of people who knew each other's thoughts without words. "We did all right," Adam said quietly during a lull in the festivities, his voice for her alone. "For two people who married to escape a con man, we built something pretty spectacular. We did better than all right." Eleanor kissed him, not caring who might see, still as in love as she had been in that Fort Worth hotel room when they first acknowledged their feelings. "We built everything. A home, a family, a life worth living. You gave me all of that, Adam. We gave it to each other." Adam pulled her close, and Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder, perfectly content. "That is what real love is, Eleanor. Two people choosing each other every day, building something together that neither could create alone." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Eleanor thought about the naive young woman she had been all those years ago, standing in a dusty street with a crumpled telegram and a breaking heart. She thought about the quiet cowboy who had agreed to help a desperate stranger, who had offered protection without expectation of reward. She thought about the unlikely marriage that had saved her life and given her everything she never knew she wanted. The telegram had warned her that Charles did not love her, but it had done something more important. It had led her to Adam, to a love so real and deep and true that it had sustained them through 25 years and would carry them through whatever years remained. That anonymous warning had been the greatest gift she ever received, not because it revealed betrayal, but because it opened the door to genuine love. Eleanor had learned that love was not about pretty words or grand gestures. It was about showing up every day, about respecting your partner's strength while supporting their vulnerabilities, about building something together that was greater than the sum of its parts. It was about a cowboy who said, "He does not love you, miss," and then spent his life proving what real love looked like through patient action and unwavering devotion. As the party continued around them and their family celebrated the love that had shaped all their lives, Eleanor and Adam sat together in perfect contentment. They had started with nothing but desperate hope and instinctive trust. They had built an empire of love that would endure long after they were gone, carried forward by children and grandchildren, who would never know how close they came to not existing at all. The wild Texas wind whispered through the mesquite trees, carrying the laughter of their grandchildren and the promises of generations yet unborn. Eleanor and Adam had written their love story in the harsh soil of the frontier, watered it with hard work and genuine devotion, and watched it bloom into something beautiful. It was not the story Eleanor had imagined for herself when she accepted Charles's proposal, but it was infinitely better. It was real, earned through honesty and partnership rather than built on deception and calculation. She had been saved by a warning and a cowboy's quiet integrity. She had saved herself by being brave enough to trust a stranger and smart enough to recognize real love when it appeared in dusty boots and work-worn hands. Together, she and Adam had created a legacy that would outlast them both, proof that sometimes the best love stories began with the simplest truth. "He does not love you, miss," followed by a lifetime of showing what real love truly meant.